All right, everyone. Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief MacGillis from Wauwatosa PD in Wisconsin. Over 30 years experience total in law enforcement, has spent the last 5 years as Chief of Police. Welcome to the show, Chief
Thank
MacGillis.
you. Happy to be here.
Of course, we're happy to be here, and thank you for spending the next 30, 45 minutes with us talking to us about leadership and wellness. We appreciate it. I'm interested to know, who are you outside of the career?
I'm a father. I love to ride Harleys with my friends, all of which are not police officers. I like to spend time with my kids. I do stuff through my church, play sheep's head for fun. That makes me sound kind of old, but it, I have a lot of other hobbies outside of work. Um, I actually grew up here in Wauwatosa, which is also kind of cool. It's neat to be able to serve the community that I went to grade school, middle school, high school in, I go to church in, and a way to give back.
I love it. How important do you think everything that you just said, all of those qualities of being a dad and a friend and being able to have different hobbies and, riding Harleys and having friends outside of the career, how important has that been for you in the progression of your career, but then also the longevity of your career?
Well, I think nobody in this career goes through it alone. Otherwise, it'll be a very lonely existence. Relationships are important. Having sufficient support around you, whether it's family, friends. I often reference with my own staff, Dr. Gil Martin's book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, about how you go through these different life cycles of your career, different pinnacle timeframes, about where you might need a refresh and where you need different outlets. I would say the majority of my friend group are not police officers. They're normal people. Um, I say that joking, people that aren't exposed to the day and day rigors of community service and government service and seeing people sometimes at their worst, oftentimes seeing them at their worst, where we're expected to be at our best. So it's essential to think about this as a marathon, not a sprint,
Mhm.
and having good support structures there along the way at all levels of an organization. Each rank, position, responsibility have different rigors, different stressors. None is worse or better than the other. They're just their stress. And there has to be some type of healthy outlet along the way, and being able to share those things outside of work with friend groups, family, having that support is essential.
Yeah, I agree. And I was the opposite for a really long time with my career, and obviously it's different than yours. But I allowed my career to completely consume me. I didn't have anything outside of what I did. It was 1,000% pedal to the floor, like I'm doing this and only this. And there were consequences to that. Of course, I was able to maybe excel a little bit quicker because it was so all consuming, and I was like, I'm gonna get here like no matter what as quickly as I can. And those things maybe did happen for me professionally, but my personal life was left in shambles. And it's really hard when you're going through the valleys, because we will go through valleys, and you feel like you're going through those valleys alone because you didn't invest in those outside outlets or resources or those people. And now you look around and you're like, there's no one here because I didn't prioritize those things. I prioritized work, and work doesn't love you back as much as maybe some of us hope it would.
Uh, you're you're right on target there. I remember early in my policing career, I was in a busy district and it was a whole new world. And you're chasing bad guys and you're helping people, and it's exciting. And every day is something new. It's regardless of the profession. If you love the work, it doesn't really feel like work. You'd almost do it for free, right?
Mhm.
And I got promoted after about 5.5 years to sergeant, and then I was assigned to work at the academy where I was training other people. And I was in that 5, 6, 7 year mark, married, young children, and things on a personal front weren't looking so good. I'll just say it that way. And had to recalibrate I've been married for 30 years. I'm in the minority. I get that. People go through those peaks and valleys. And I give my wife a lot of credit for knocking me upside the head and say, hey, where's your priority? Is it
Mm,
us? Is it the kids? Is it your work? Because evidently work is more important than everything else. And I love police work. I loved all aspects of it, training, operations, being out on the street, helping people, all the fun, intricate, cool things that are involved in police work. But having that balance, and again, it's regardless of profession, you have to learn how to balance those things out. They
yeah.
don't train you that in the academy. It also made me, as an academy instructor, recognize that maybe I was part of the problem. As a lead instructor for the Milwaukee Police Department, the range master, teaching firearms and use of force training. And well, wait a minute, I'm teaching cops about vigilance. Maybe I'm making them hyper vigilant. But conversely, what am I doing to train them to be able to turn it off, to just be Jim or Paige or Jess? It really was a recalibration, both personally and professionally. Again,
Mm,
career survival. How do you make it to that finish line? And as a chief, when I hear people retiring, it gives me so much happiness that they made it to that finish line as healthy, happy, and whole as possible. I think that is probably one of the most important, if not the most important job as a chief, is to help your staff get to that finish line, healthy, happy, and whole.
yeah. Wow, there are a few things that you said in there that I wanted to kind of bring up again, but I love the word recalibrate. I think that we talk about like reassess. I say reassess all the time, but I love that word recalibrate because it to me it shows that like we can get back on track. We can get back on target. You know, sometimes we just have to make a few little tweaks and just kind of recalibrate ourselves and our priorities. So I really appreciated that word, but I also think it's not an and this is something that I've learned through my wisdom of age is that it's not an or conversation, it's an and conversation. You can do what you just said. You can love your career and you can put 100% effort into your career and you can have a successful home life. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but I think at least when I was younger, I convinced myself that nope, if I wanted to have a successful career, that meant that I had to sacrifice everything else and everything else around me had to burn to the ground. And I don't think that now. I think that you can have both. It's an and conversation, not an or conversation. And I agree with you. I think we have to go back to the why. You know, I think that's the driving force that's going to get us to the end of our lives as happy and healthy and whole as possible is understanding why are we doing these things? Why are we focusing on family and health and being able to turn it off? Why are these things important? Well, it's because you want to get to the end of your career and you want to thrive. You know, it's like we have to raise that bar and understand that like you are probably going to burn out at some point. We all have phases of burnout, but how do we move past that? And then how can we enjoy the fruits of our labor later on in our older age and thrive, not just, you said survive, and I think it's true, but like I want to kind of raise that bar of like, how do we thrive?
I also think it's courageous leadership to not be afraid to share those experiences, especially in a leadership position. I
Hmm.
also think it's responsible leadership to talk about the importance of reflection and introspection,
Hmm.
taking a back look. Hey, why was I doing these things? Why did these things happen? How do I recalibrate so I can get to that thriving
Yeah.
level of that work-life balance? Um, a couple epiphanies I've had over my career is uh, to get control, and this is a very controlling profession where you establish control at a scene and you manage and control people and what they're doing and doing your job as a law enforcement officer, whether you're a sheriff or a police officer. But the only way to get control is to let go of control. It sounds
Mm,
contradictory, but let go to your faith, let go to your significant other, your spouse, have candid conversations with your family, your kids, but also have candid conversations with people that you work with. There's no shame in it. It's allowing people to see you as a human being and recognizing that you are a human being. And it's okay to reflect back and think about maybe some of the mistakes you've made and own it. And what are you going to do with it?
yeah. Wow. Thank you. I loved that. And I think that that statement is so true, but also it's difficult for people to understand that sometimes you have to let go of control. and control the controllable a little bit, but also understand there's a lot of things outside of your control.
When you get to that balancing point page, and it's not always perfect, but it also makes going to work on the street or going to
Mm.
meetings or interacting with the community, you become almost balanced with it. That people are going to come to you with issues, and it's nothing personal against you. It's they're venting, and um, you're not there to change hearts and minds. You're there to just share your perspective, but you're also there to hear their perspective. One of my coworkers shared this with me early in my tenure here as a chief. Jim, we have two ears and one mouth. Do more listening than talking. And like, no wiser words have ever been said, whether it's with my wife, whether it's with my kids. And I like to talk to people. I like to interact with them. But a lot of times it's just good to shut up and let them share too.
Yeah.
And listen to them, not just hear them, listen to them. So
Yeah. I love it. And I appreciate the distinction between listening and hearing.
Out
big
of
difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
out of curiosity, you mentioned like you had a couple epiphanies happen throughout your career where you started to have those moments click for you. Do you think it was due to some sort of, and maybe it was just a learning lesson, or was it something that just what was it that clicked for you in that moment?
Um, well, on a personal front, with my spouse, with my wife, and my kids. Again, being the son of a law enforcement officer, my dad was never around. He was also in the National Guard. I was in the National Guard at the time. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to relive this. And I love my father. He's still around. He was over for Father's Day. But we talk about these things now. I wish we would have talked about them then. I don't think my dad knew how to have that work-life balance. And I didn't want to live that way with my children either. My daughter, she's an elementary art teacher. My son, he's a law enforcement officer
New law
and
enforcement officer, correct?
brand new law enforcement officer, still on probation. Um, I admire my kids that they're doing some type of service, something that for them is purposeful, that gives them purpose in life, regardless of their career choice. I'm proud of my children. But I also knew I did not want to have a relationship with my kids where I was absent, where we didn't talk about the boyfriend or the girlfriend, or hey, how do I pay my bills? Or hey, I've got car insurance due, or hey, I had this thing happen at work. And it's about being present, putting the cell phones aside, silencing them, and having the conversation and really hearing them, listening to them, but also hearing what they're saying. And maybe just being an ear to listen to, not try and problem solve. I mean, I think about a book I read many years ago called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And it doesn't really speak to men or women, whether it's gender roles. We just communicate differently. And it's understanding what the person needs, asking them, being more of an active listener versus a active talker. um, so having those kind of epiphanies, I think about losing an officer in the line of duty, how that brings people together, but we should be bringing ourselves together even when there isn't tragedy. Um, Understanding that when you're in a leadership role, people do pay attention to what you say and how you express yourself, and words matter. So you need to be deliberate in how you communicate, whether you're talking, writing, but also how you're listening, how you're hearing people too, and asking for clarification.
Yeah, it
So,
all goes back to asking the questions and hearing what people are really saying.
right. And pride should be the first to fall, right?
Mhm.
That can be a barrier. So think about other people you work with, other leaders, and what are their motivations? Is it for upward mobility, a better job, self-aggrandizement? How are you going to interact with people like that as well? So, and how are you comporting yourself too in your leadership role? How do people see you? So,
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, that your father was the in law enforcement and he really taught you how to be or to not be for your son who's now entering into law enforcement.
well, you can learn from the good and the
Mhm.
mistakes,
Yeah.
or the areas of improvement. And trust me, I'm not perfect. I know I know it better than anybody. Um, but it's always trying to be a better father first,
Mhm.
uh, stronger in my faith, be a better husband, and try and be a better leader in this organization too. So, in that order,
I love
faith first, spouse next, kids next. And think about earlier in my career, the job was up here. And then my wife and kids, I kind of probably put our kids before our relationship. And then faith was somehow intermingled in there. And then I had a really nice chaplain sit down with me and have a conversation, many conversations actually, about, hey, where's your priority? What's the most important thing in your career, in your life? Well, got to be my faith, my relationship with God, and then my wife next, because without our relationship, we don't have a family. Our kids, they're important, but not above my wife and I. I remember in our wedding video, somebody, put your marriage first, put your marriage first. I didn't listen. I didn't understand what that really meant until the work-life balance was out of whack. And I'm like, wait a minute, I remember that conversation, what people had told me, that advice. I wish I would have listened earlier. So
nice you have a video of it though. You can
th-
reflect
th-
back on it.
30 years later, we're still married. It's still, marriage takes work. Being a good police chief, police officer takes work. You have
Mhm.
to put effort into it, deliberate effort. Communication takes effort. You have to be deliberate about how you communicate with people, but also how you hear and listen to people as well.
Yeah.
So,
You said something earlier that I really wanted to circle back to, and I think these have been the most instrumental moments in my life too, when I've been able to like zoom out a little bit and look around and ask myself, who do I want to be like, and do I not want to be like? Who do I want to surround myself with? Who do I not want to surround myself with? And I love that you said earlier, you're like, I love my dad. Like he was a role model for you. You love your dad. There are some things that like you're like, I think I would like to do this differently. Not because he was a bad guy, but maybe because he didn't know any better at the time because of the generation that he grew up in. And I think it's important to look at that and say, like, how can we be better and how can we improve ourselves moving forward? And I've had many times where I've looked around and I've been like, I don't want to be like anyone here. I got to get out of here, you know? Like, and if that's the case, like hightail it out of there. How do we surround ourselves with people who are gonna, uplift us? But then there are other moments where you look around and you're like, wow, I really liked this piece, but I think I can improve upon this piece. And to your point of what you said about being a dad, it really hits me close because I'm about to be a first-time mom. And
congratulations.
thank you. And I didn't have a mom in my life, really at all. She was a drug addict. She was kind of in and out of my life. Not a great example of what to be as a mom. And I always had a lot of fear around that. I was like, man, I don't have any good examples of what it looks like to be a mom. And then as I got older, I was like, you know what? I feel like that's exactly why I'm going to be a really great mom because I can take a look at those things that were not so great and I have the choice. And I think everything we're talking about when you say communication and listening and recalibrating and prioritizing, all of these things, they're choices, and they're how we choose to live our life. And so I realize I have the choice to do the opposite of all those things so that I can be a really great mom. And so I think that having the ability to have that introspection and self-assess, but then also take a look at like who are we surrounding ourselves with and how can we take all the really good things and then how can we improve upon the hard things.
One thing that just jumped into my head here, Paige, when you're talking about the with your mom, and it makes me also think about in the law enforcement profession about training. And I'll kind of say it this way. I was trained by a different generation, and they trained me the way they thought I should be trained. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm a Gen Xer and they're a baby boomer, and there's a generational gap. Now,
Mhm.
fast forward 30 years, now I'm training Gen Zs, and I forget what they call the newer generation, but I can't communicate with them the way that I want to be communicated with. I need to connect with them the way they need to receive it, whether it's training or whether it's just information. You also take the parental involvement too. We are byproducts of how we were raised, or in absentia,
Mhm.
not having somebody present there, and you're kind of left to your own devices. So getting to know people and where they're from and what they're about, I think is all relationships are critical. Knowing your people as best as you can. I get it. These are a barrier, especially in the law enforcement profession, but that's how people also see, oh, you're the chief, let's have a conversation just person to person and tell me about you. What are your interests? Tell me about your family. Um, Not be afraid to share a little bit about yourself too, I
Yeah.
don't think vulnerability is weakness. I think it's actually a sign of strength. Just like I think kindness, especially in leadership, is not a sign of weakness. I think it's a strength. You can be kind to people while you're putting handcuffs on them. You can use forceful language while you're putting handcuffs on them or directing them to the ground. It's nothing personal. You can still be supportive. So, sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there,
No,
but
I
just
no, I
trying to keep
appreciate
things in
it.
my head.
No, I appreciate that, and I think it's true. It's kind of like teaching 101. It's like how do you because the goal is for people to learn and to have the best opportunity at success. And we have to be able to adapt our styles. If we're training or we're teaching people, we have to be able to adapt in a way that people are going to respond. It's the same way with when we communicate with people. It doesn't matter if you're saying all the things that you want to say, if it's not being received well. And we can even think of this, you've been in a 30-year marriage, like how many times have you tried to talk to your partner, not you, but like us in general? Like I've done it, you try to talk to your partner and they're not receiving it in the way that you're trying to say it. And you have to adapt into a way that they're going to respond. And so I think it is really important that we understand the nuances of human beings and how we communicate. But I also agree with you. Um, I think vulnerability is essential. I think there's no question that you're the chief. No one's going to question that. They know you're the chief. You don't have to assert that every single time. You can show up with a smile and you can ask people how they're doing. And I would argue that that actually takes you a lot further. So I think to your point of what you were saying before, it's also not an or, it's an and. Like you said, you can be kind and assertive. You can treat people with respect and still take them to jail. Those things can exist at once. It's not one or the other. So I think it's just recognizing that we're all human and how can we communicate and treat people in the most effective way possible.
Well, going back to you being a first-time parent, you're on the road to a great adventure.
I know. I'm in trouble, honestly, and I've shared this before. I did have a hard upbringing, and I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger. I had a rebellious phase where I was choosing the wrong paths and the wrong friends, and you know, trying to cope with my trauma in different ways. And I always said, I'm like, if I have a baby, I just hope it's not a girl, because I know if I have a girl, that I'm gonna get all the karma, all the things back on me, that I put, because I was raised by a single stepdad. So I was like, I would get all the karma. And fate would have it that we're having a girl. So I'm buckling up. I'm ready.
But you also have this nice thing called experience too, from your
Yeah.
own lived experiences. I think
Yeah.
about people that we interact with in law enforcement. Everybody's got a backstory. People do have skeletons in their closet or things that have happened. That's a part of their story. You just don't take it personal and understand that's how they've made choices in life. And it's none of us is perfect. We all make mistakes. I just have to put handcuffs on you and hold you accountable for this particular mistake
Yeah.
or mistakes plural. Um, Everybody's got a backstory. But that also makes you who you are as well, and understanding of those differences,
Yeah.
right?
And I appreciate you recognizing the person outside of the behavior. I think that for me, because I came from the background that I did, I do have the ability to, because I had parents who were criminals and drug addicts. My dad was in prison and gang affiliated, and like, he did all these things and he did commit crimes and he did serve time for those crimes. But I could also see him as like my dad and see him as a person. And so I think being able to differentiate the human behind the behavior and then also ask why are these things happening, hurt people, what happened in this person's life, or what was their upbringing that led them there. I think it gives us an upper hand because we can have that emotional intelligence and that empathy for people to try to understand, and then maybe even have a better impact on them long term. I've talked to many chiefs that have treated people that way and have had people later in life come up to them and say, hey, like you were the first person that treated me with kindness and it meant a lot, and now I have my life back together. And so sometimes that little like bit of hope or kindness is all someone needs to turn their life around. Not always, obviously, but sometimes it works that way.
Nothing gives me greater pride in this department than when I get feedback as a chief that, hey, this was a bad situation, but man, officer so and so, even though I had to go to jail, they treated me with respect and they let me keep my dignity. And I'm like, that's why I consider myself blessed to be in the position I am in this department, especially in the community that I grew up in. Lucky, privilege, what we do that I landed here because I get to work with some great professionals that treat people that way. When I first came here, we had a long, very wordy mission statement. And 3 months in as a chief, I asked our staff, what are we really here to do? What is our mission? And we went a little bit around and round with the supervisors, and they came up with dedicated service and protection for all people. Simple, memorable. And then I asked, well, what does a Wauwatosa police officer look like? Oh, courage, respect, integrity, and compassion. Our staff actually came up with those core values. That's what a Wauwatosa police officer looks like.
Mm.
So talking about the compassion piece, yeah, you need to be courageous. You need to show people respect, but you need to be brave, courageous to do this work, but you can also do it with compassion.
Yeah.
I, again, I love hearing feedback about how our teammates engage with people. So
Yeah.
a lot of pride there.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest ROIs, you investing into your people and then they're investing back into the community in a positive way. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, in 2020, a bad year for law enforcement and the Wauwatosa Police Department. If you look at open source media, there was a lot of bad things that were going on in several parts of the country, but also here in Wauwatosa. It was probably the worst year in the history of the city. But I also think about how we as a team have really rebuilt the community capital of trust that we have, that bank of trust, by engaging with people, being present, talking with them, treating them with compassion, but also holding them accountable to their bad behaviors and what they're doing.
Yeah.
Uh, we just did a community survey. We got really wonderful feedback from community members saying how much they want to see more of us and they appreciate the work that these officers are out there doing. And they're quick responding and taking care of the situation. People feel safe. I can throw data and numbers at them till I'm blue in the face. I'm kind of a data nerd. But if people really don't feel safe, then why are we doing this?
Right.
We need to show tangible results in the numbers, but people also need to feel safe as well. And our officers recognize that. I truly believe they recognize the importance of both sides of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
What do you think the biggest challenge in policing is today?
Well, staffing, I, and that's throughout the country. Our staffing has been at a very, I would say, all-time low. It was from the hiring from 25 plus years ago, mass hiring, and then we have stasis, and then some people retire and our staffing goes down, and we build it back up, and then the second group of people that were hired 25, 30 years ago then retiring. So we're like several departments in the country. Plus, I also think 2020 had that adverse effect on this profession. But I also think we have to own a piece of that too. We weren't sharing our story enough about the positive interactions and how we have made a difference. And yeah, here's what our crime numbers look like, but here's also an officer stopping to play basketball with some kids, or how we're doing more business checks, or or owning when we do have somebody who made a bad choice in our profession, our own internal accountability. So we're on the upswing. Um, most departments are always looking for people that want to align with their core values. That's why I share what our core values are. I also think our best recruiters are our own staff. I tell them frequently that tell your friends if you think this is a great place to work and you think somebody would align with what we do and how we do it, encourage them to jump into this profession. And I get it, it's not for everybody. Not everybody's attuned to being a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or working in a tool shop. You have to align personal goals and organizational goals. So,
That's how the world works. We can't all do, the same profession, or else we wouldn't all work together in those ways. So, do you think that wellness helps with retention and hiring?
everybody that I've hired since I've been in this role, I have an opportunity to talk to them one-on-one through new officer orientation. And I ask them, what brought you here? Well, the fact that you've got a very generous paternal maternal leave policy, especially for people that are starting young families. It's also very challenging, especially with a 24-hour operation, balancing our staffing and workload. But I also get it, it brings people to the door. We have a really good peer support team, an internal peer support team. We also have additional mental health services that are provided on top of their insurance benefits as well. Those are things that, especially the younger generation, recognize for a better work-life balance. Is I need to have those type of support pieces in place or offered. One of the things that I've been looking at for the last 5 years in this role is how do we bring chaplaincy in? Because I firmly believe majority of people believe in something. And I also understand and have seen, and also from personal experience, how chaplaincy, that spiritual support as well, is invaluable to a wellness and resiliency.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really helpful, and to be able to provide those resources is necessary, especially today.
Well, and we don't have a chaplain now, 5 years later. We're still always on the lookout, but I think it has to be the right fit.
Mhm.
It can't be somebody who wants to push their faith down somebody's throat. It has to have a balanced approach. The best chaplains are one that know how to listen and know how to speak about spirituality and strength and faith, not as a piece of weakness, but also as a sign of strength. Because majority of people do believe in something, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or Christian.
Yeah. How does wellness play into culture, would you say?
Well, I mentioned staffing.
Yeah.
If we don't have a culture where people want to advertise, hey, this is a great place to work, they're not going to recruit, or they're going to get to their finish line and out, without, they would just want to get to the finish line.
Yeah.
Um, so it's good for people, the younger generation of officers coming on, but I also think for that marathon of a policing career, getting through the peaks and the valleys, especially the valleys.
Yeah. And you mentioned the community too, getting out in the community
Mhm.
has been really important for you.
I also, the survey results, asking the community as part of a grant that we're doing,
Mhm.
part of it was polling the community and asking those tough questions. What do you think of the Wauwatosa Police Department? About our service? What do you want to see more of? And the percentages were high in a bunch of different categories, and then sharing that with our staff that, hey, this isn't 2020 where there was a lot of squeaky wheels, casting shade on this department or the profession. We've asked them, and this is the feedback that they're giving. They want more of you. They want to see you out. They want to see you stopping cars. They want to see you stopping by the kids in the park or coming to community events. So that was a good thing to share, I think, with our staff as well. That, yeah, the community really does support you.
I think when you have an organization that focuses on culture and making sure that people feel valued and they have the resources that they need to have a long and successful career, then it does a few things. One, it makes people want to stay. because they know that they're working for an agency that cares about them. It makes them want to then promote the agency for other, potential hires in the future. I also think the potential hires are coming in and that's what they're focusing on. We've had conversations with other agencies who have gone to job fairs and instead of focusing on SWAT and canine and all these different like high tech, drones, they're like, this is what we do for wellness. And they had a line wrapped around the corner versus everyone else who is focusing on those like higher level things. And I think that we're seeing the younger generation come in and say, what can you do for me to support my longevity in the career? So I think we're seeing a couple things happen where the younger generation almost expects it. But then the current generation is promoting it and they're staying longer because of it. And then they're able to provide a better service to the community, and the community is now pouring back into them because now it's this effective mutual partnership. And so it's this full circle moment that's starting with the very early brand new officer coming in, the current generation, um, how they're operating in the field, and then the community pouring back into them. And so I think that it all intertwines together. Did I get there? Did my
Yeah.
brain get there?
You did.
Okay.
I think you're right on target. I call it the Whiffam principle. What's in it for me?
Mm,
Whereas my generation maybe was more so, I want to go have a 25, 30-year career and what can I do? And I know I'm going to get a pension and I'm going to have good benefits and be supported. Whereas the younger generation, they want to make sure that those things are in place, recognizing that whole work-life balance, that this isn't their identity. This is what they're going to do as a job and hopefully make it into their career. We've had people that have applied, they went through field training and they say, I'm tapping out. This isn't for me.
mm.
That's the reality. 20 years ago, that didn't happen hardly at all. And it's becoming more frequent, not just at this agency, but other agencies as well. I think you're right on point about talking about those things on the front end helps bring people through the door. Aside from the fact it's a fun, exciting, very rewarding career. Um, but yeah, employees nowadays, the younger people, but we also have hired people that are also a little bit older that have life experience as well. They have been through some trials and tribulations and they have a little bit better communication skills, de-escalating situations. That's become a buzzword in law enforcement about de-escalation. Well, we've been doing it out on the street. We don't want to fight with people or have to take them to jail. But that's sometimes what we have to do. But it also depends on how our staff are communicating with people. We talk a lot more than we swing a baton or use pepper spray, but we also need to have proficiency in those skills as well, along with the communication piece.
You stayed in
Yeah.
the career over 30 years. So what's kept you going?
People, people that have that same dedication and drive to serve. And it's a very fun career. Having it been at different stages, officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and then this job, it's been fun. It's been very rewarding.
And
So
you
I get it
said,
why my son wanted to pursue this
Yeah.
career.
I was just gonna say that. I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I know that your son is a brand new officer, and you recently had a conversation with him about the career. And our last question on the podcast is always your words of wisdom for the younger generation. So I think you're set up really perfectly to tell us what words of wisdom would you share with the younger generation, or have you shared with your son?
So my son one day came home from work and I was sitting on the couch and he said, Dad, I got to tell you something. And I don't know how to tell you this. I'm thinking, uh-oh, what's going on? He said, I don't know how to tell you this, Dad. What? You can tell me anything. I love you. You're my son. I said, Dad, I really, really love this career. Gosh, I love it so much. It's so much fun. It's so interesting and it's exciting and they pay me well to do it. And I just love it. I said, well, why don't you sit down? And we had about an hour and a half long conversation about, yeah, you can love this career, but never, ever love it more than you love your wife, your strength in your faith, your children. You got to keep some perspective on it. I said, I wish my father would have had that conversation with me, but he probably didn't know how to. But we had that conversation, and I promise you that If you start stepping in it a little bit, I'm going to give you a kick in the butt. He's bigger than I am. He's about 6'4", big football player body, very strong. Then I'll run if I kick him in the butt. If I kick my butt. But it was a great conversation, but it's also the same conversation I have with our new officers about the work-life balance. And they really don't know what they don't know when they come into this profession. But that's why we have supervisors to have those similar conversations along the way. If they're being overly invested or working too much overtime, our job is to pull them back and make sure that they have a work-life balance. Again, so they complete the marathon, not a sprint.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much. Yeah, thank you for coming on here today and talking to us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course.